Commander Kale stood in the command center of the massive Vorthan warship, staring at reports that made no sense at all. 3 entire battle fleets had vanished near a small blue planet called Earth, and nobody could explain how this was possible. The ships that disappeared were some of the most powerful vessels in the galaxy, each one capable of destroying entire cities with a single blast. Yet somehow they were all gone without even sending a distress signal. The blue planet looked peaceful. From space, with white clouds swirling over green and brown continents, small metal ships orbited the world, looking like toys compared to the sleek energy vessels of the Vorthan Empire. These human ships were made of basic materials like steel and aluminum instead of the advanced crystalline hulls that most civilized species used. Their weapons appeared to be simple projectile launchers and primitive energy beams, nothing that should threaten a properly shielded warship. Captain Nara walked up to her commander holding a data pad filled with intelligence reports about the inhabitants of Earth. The humans living on this world had only recently developed space travel, and their technology seemed hundreds of years behind the Galactic standard. They had no energy manipulation abilities, no natural armor plating, and no enhanced physical capabilities that were common among warrior species. Their bodies looked soft and fragile with thin skin that could be easily damaged. What made the situation even more confusing was that humans appeared to be fighting each other as much as they fought alien invaders. Satellite images showed constant warfare across the planet's surface, with different human groups using increasingly destructive weapons against their own kind. This behavior seemed wasteful and illogical to the Vorthan military mind, which valued efficiency and calculated strategy above all else. Private Day studied video footage captured from the battles where the Vorthan fleets had disappeared. The recordings showed something that defied military logic. Human soldiers moved in chaotic patterns that made no tactical sense. They shouted and screamed during combat, displaying emotions that should have interfered with proper decision-making. Some of them even appeared to be smiling while engaged in deadly fighting. The young private had studied warfare at the Imperial Academy, where instructors taught that successful combat required calm, rational thinking and precise execution of predetermined strategies. Emotions were considered a weakness that led to poor judgment and tactical errors. Yet these humans seemed to fight better when they were emotional, displaying a savage enthusiasm that was both fascinating and disturbing. Lieutenant Bio examined the wreckage that had been recovered from the lost fleets. The damage patterns were unlike anything in their military databases. Instead of the clean, precise destruction caused by energy weapons, the Vorthan ships showed signs of being attacked by multiple different weapon types simultaneously. Some areas had been hit by explosive projectiles, while others showed evidence of close-range melee combat. The idea that primitives with basic technology could engage Vorthan warships in hand-to-hand combat seemed impossible. The energy shields alone should have prevented any physical contact. Yet the evidence clearly showed that humans had somehow boarded the vessels and fought the crews directly. This suggested a level of tactical boldness that bordered on insanity. Major Ray brought disturbing news from the intelligence division. Their deep space monitoring stations had detected unusual energy signatures coming from the human homeworld. These readings suggested that Earth was producing far more military equipment than should be possible for a planet with their level of technology. Somehow, the humans were manufacturing weapons and vehicles at a rate that matched or exceeded much more advanced civilizations. The manufacturing centers appeared to be working around the clock, with multiple shifts of workers producing everything from small arms to massive space vessels. What made this even more remarkable was that much of the production seemed to be happening during active warfare. Human factories continued operating even when they were under attack, with workers remaining at their posts. Despite obvious danger, Commander Kale called a meeting of his senior officers to discuss the situation. The Vorthan Empire had conquered dozens of worlds and absorbed numerous species into their ranks, but they had never encountered anything quite like humanity. Most civilized races either surrendered when faced with superior technology or negotiated for favorable terms before fighting began. Humans seemed to prefer fighting even when the odds were hopeless. Colonel Lee shared intelligence reports about human military training that painted an even stranger picture. Human soldiers underwent preparation that would be considered torture by galactic standards. They were forced to carry heavy equipment over long distances in extreme weather conditions. They practiced combat techniques. While exhausted, hungry, and injured, they were subjected to psychological pressure designed to break their spirits, yet somehow emerged stronger from the experience. The training methods seemed designed to prepare humans for situations where normal military doctrine would call for retreat or surrender. Instead of teaching soldiers to preserve their lives and equipment, human instructors focused on completing missions regardless of casualties. This approach violated every principle of civilized warfare but appeared to be remarkably effective. Captain Nera presented analysis of human communication intercepts during recent battles. The language used by human soldiers was filled with aggressive terminology and threats that would be considered unprofessional by Vorthan standards. Yet this crude communication seemed to boost morale and fighting effectiveness rather than causing confusion or fear. Even more disturbing was the discovery that humans seemed to enjoy combat in a way that other species found disturbing. Radio intercepts revealed soldiers laughing, joking, and even singing during battles. Some units competed with each other to see who could achieve the most kills or complete the most dangerous missions. This suggested a psychological makeup that was fundamentally different from other intelligent species. The High Command decided that a direct investigation was necessary. They would send a small reconnaissance team to Earth, using advanced cloaking technology to observe human military operations firsthand. The mission would be led by Commander Kale with a hand-picked crew of elite soldiers trained in stealth operations and xenobiologists. They prepared for departure. The team studied every available piece of information about human culture and military capabilities. What they found suggested that warfare played a central role in human society unlike any other known civilization. Their entertainment included simulated combat. Their sports involved physical competition, and even their children played games that mimicked military tactics. Private Day volunteered for the dangerous mission, despite warnings from his superiors about the unpredictable nature of human behavior. He was curious about a species that seemed to thrive on conflict rather than seeking to avoid it. The young soldier had grown up in the peaceful Vorthan society where violence was rare and carefully controlled. He could not imagine what it would be like to live among beings who appeared to be natural warriors. The reconnaissance ship departed from the main fleet under cover of darkness, using experimental stealth technology that would make them invisible to human detection systems. As they approached the blue planet, Commander Kale wondered what they would discover about these strange beings who had somehow destroyed three of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. Looking at Earth from space, it was hard to believe that such a peaceful-looking world could be home to the universe's most deadly warriors, but the evidence was undeniable, and soon they would learn the truth about humanity fighting abilities. The Vorthan reconnaissance ship descended through Earth atmosphere using advanced cloaking technology that made them invisible to human detection systems. Commander Kale selected a landing site near a human military installation located in a mountainous region where the rocky terrain would provide natural cover for their operations. The base below looked primitive compared to Vorthan facilities, but something about it felt dangerous in a way that the aliens could not explain through their sophisticated surveillance equipment. The team observed human soldiers conducting training exercises that seemed unnecessarily brutal by galactic standards. Groups of young humans were forced to carry heavy packs while running up steep mountain trails in extreme weather conditions. Their instructors shouted harsh commands and threats that would be considered abuse in most civilized societies, yet the trainees appeared to respond positively to this treatment. Sergeant Wu watched in fascination as human drill instructors pushed recruits beyond what should have been their physical limits. The young soldiers were made to crawl through mud under razor wire while explosions went off around them. They practiced hand-to-hand combat until they were covered in bruises and bleeding from minor cuts, yet instead of complaining or requesting medical attention, they seemed energized by the brutal training. The Vorthan military used positive reinforcement and careful psychological conditioning to prepare their warriors for combat. They believed that stress and pain interfered with proper decision-making and tactical thinking. Human training methods appeared to be designed specifically to teach soldiers how to function effectively while experiencing maximum stress and discomfort. Private Min observed human soldiers practicing with their weapons and noticed something that challenged everything he knew about military science. The humans did not just learn to use their equipment properly, they modified and customized their weapons in ways that violated standard safety protocols. Some soldiers carried multiple different weapon types while others had attached crude but effective accessories to improve performance. What made this even more remarkable was that much of the weapon modification appeared to be done by individual soldiers rather than trained technicians. The humans seemed to have an intuitive understanding of how their equipment worked and could improve its effectiveness. Using basic tools and materials, this suggested a level of mechanical aptitude that was unusual among warrior species. During the night, the Vorthan team moved closer to the human base to gather more detailed intelligence. They were confident that their advanced stealth technology would keep them hidden from the primitive human detection systems. The aliens had successfully infiltrated dozens of worlds using similar equipment and had never been discovered by less advanced civilizations. However, as they approached the perimeter fence, something went wrong. A motion sensor that should not have been able to detect their cloaked forms somehow triggered an alarm system. Bright lights flooded the mountainside as sirens wailed across the military base. The Vorthans expected the humans to respond with standard defensive procedures, establishing secure perimeters and calling for backup support. Instead, they witnessed something that defied all military logic. Human soldiers did not just respond to the security breach, they attacked it with savage enthusiasm that seemed completely disproportionate to the threat. Small teams of soldiers spread out across the dangerous mountain terrain, moving through complete darkness with minimal equipment and no apparent concern for their own safety. Lieutenant Bo watched in amazement as human troops performed feats that should have been impossible for their species. They climbed nearly vertical rock faces without proper climbing gear, using only their bare hands and primitive tools. They leaped across dangerous gaps that could have resulted in fatal falls and continued pursuing the unknown intruders. Even when the terrain became increasingly treacherous, the human soldiers communicated with each other using hand signals and brief radio transmissions, but much of their coordination seemed to happen through pure instinct. They moved like a pack of predators hunting prey, with each individual soldier somehow knowing where the others would be. Without explicit coordination, this natural teamwork was unlike anything the Vorthans had observed in other species. Captain Nara monitored human radio communications during the search and was disturbed by what she heard. The soldiers were not expressing fear or concern about the potential danger. Instead, the voices carried excitement and anticipation, as if they were enjoying the hunt. Some of them were actually laughing as they pursued the invisible intruders, treating the dangerous situation like an entertaining game. One human soldier continued the pursuit despite having suffered a broken arm during a fall from a rocky ledge. Instead of seeking medical attention or withdrawing from the search, he improvised a crude sling and kept moving. The injury appeared to make him more determined rather than less effective, which violated every principle of rational behavior that the Vorthans understood. The reconnaissance team barely managed to escape using their superior technology and emergency teleportation systems. As they retreated to their hidden ship, they realized that they had grossly underestimated human capabilities. These were not primitive beings who had gotten lucky in previous battles. They were natural predators who had evolved specifically for warfare. Major reanalyzed the encounter and identified several disturbing patterns in human behavior. The soldiers had not just responded to a security threat, they had turned it into a hunting exercise that they clearly enjoyed. The humans showed no fear of injury or death and seemed to become more effective fighters when facing danger rather than less capable. The team reviewed footage of the human search operation and noticed that the soldiers used tactics that were both primitive and sophisticated. They employed basic tracking techniques, like following footprints and broken vegetation, but combined these with advanced coordination and strategic thinking. The result was a hunting method that was far more effective than it should have been. Commander Kale called an emergency meeting to discuss what they had learned. The humans were not just skilled fighters, they were a species that had turned warfare into an art form. Every aspect of their military culture seemed designed to produce soldiers who would fight effectively under impossible conditions and never give up. Regardless of the odds, Private Day suggested that they needed to observe human civilian populations to understand how this warrior mentality developed. The team had assumed that only human soldiers possessed these remarkable abilities, but perhaps the entire species shared these characteristics. If that was true, then humanity represented a threat unlike anything the galaxy had ever encountered. The Vorthan ship moved to a position above a large human city where they could observe daily life without being detected. What they discovered would challenge everything they thought they knew about intelligent species and force them to reconsider their understanding of what made an effective warrior civilization. As night fell over the human settlement, the reconnaissance team prepared for another day of observation, wondering what other surprises these strange beings would reveal about themselves and hoping they would survive long enough to report their findings back to the Vorthan High Command. Captain Yoon studied the tactical data from their narrow escape and made a disturbing discovery about human coordination patterns. The soldiers who had hunted them moved like a pack of predators, with each individual somehow knowing exactly where the others would be without using electronic communication. They coordinated their attacks through subtle body language, vocal cues, and what appeared to be pure instinct developed over thousands of years of evolution. This natural teamwork explained how small human units could overwhelm much larger alien forces that relied on technological communication systems. When electronic warfare disabled their advanced coordination networks, most alien armies became confused, and ineffective human forces continued operating at full efficiency because they did not depend on technology for tactical coordination. The Vorthan reconnaissance team decided to observe human civilian areas to understand how this warrior culture developed throughout their entire society. They positioned their cloaked ship above a major population center and used advanced sensors to monitor daily activities, expecting to find a normal, peaceful civilization with a separate military class. What they discovered challenged every assumption about how intelligent species should behave. Humans competed constantly, even during routine peaceful activities. They raced each other for no apparent practical purpose, engaged in mock combat they called sports, and celebrated violence. As a form of entertainment, children played games that simulated warfare, teaching them strategy and aggressive tactics from an extremely young age. Lieutenant Bio watched human sporting events with growing amazement. The participants engaged in physical contests that would be considered assault in most civilized societies. They deliberately injured each other while crowds of spectators cheered enthusiastically for the most violent actions. Rather than being disturbed by this behavior, human society seemed to encourage and reward it. Even more disturbing was the discovery that humans did not just compete against other groups. They pushed themselves to exceed their own previous achievements in a constant cycle of self-improvement. Most alien species were satisfied once they reached adequate performance levels. But humans never stopped trying to become stronger, faster, and more skilled at everything they attempted. The team observed human emergency response services dealing with natural disasters and witnessed behavior that defied rational explanation. While other species would evacuate dangerous areas and wait for conditions to improve, humans ran directly into danger to rescue others. Firefighters entered burning buildings that were collapsing around them. Rescue workers searched unstable earthquake ruins, and medical teams provided aid while under enemy attack. Private Min watched a human rescue operation where a building had collapsed, trapping dozens of people inside. Instead of waiting for proper equipment and safety measures, human rescuers immediately began digging through the rubble with their bare hands. They worked for hours without rest, ignoring their own injuries and continuing even when aftershocks threatened to bring down more debris. The rescuers showed no expectation of reward or recognition for their dangerous actions. They risked their lives for complete strangers simply because those people needed help. This selfless behavior was combined with a savage determination that allowed them to accomplish seemingly impossible rescue missions through pure willpower and physical endurance. Major Ray analyzed human medical practices and found that they had developed surgical techniques specifically For treating combat injuries, their entire healthcare system seemed designed around the assumption that people would regularly suffer severe trauma from violence. Their doctors could perform complex operations under battlefield conditions that would challenge the best medical facilities on other worlds. During their observation period, a human military unit stationed near the city came under attack from raiders belonging to a hostile alien species called the Keth. The Vorthans expected to witness standard defensive tactics with the humans, establishing secure positions and calling for reinforcements, while minimizing casualties through careful strategy. Instead, they watched humans do something that violated every principle of civilized warfare. When their defensive position became hopeless and retreat was the only logical option, the human commander ordered a counterattack so ferocious and unexpected that it caught the technologically superior Keth raiders completely off guard. The human soldiers charged directly into enemy fire using primitive weapons and crude tactics that should have resulted in their immediate destruction. Instead, their savage enthusiasm and complete disregard for personal safety created chaos among the Keth forces, who had expected rational military behavior. The raiders fled in terror after suffering heavy casualties from an enemy they had considered inferior. Corporal Ha recorded the entire battle and played it back in slow motion to understand what had happened. The humans had not just fought desperately, they had turned their hopeless situation into a psychological weapon that broke the enemy morale through sheer audacity. The Keth raiders were experienced warriors who had conquered multiple worlds, but they had never faced opponents who fought with such reckless determination. The tactical analysis revealed that humans possessed an instinctive understanding of psychological warfare that went far beyond formal military training. They knew how to use fear, surprise, and aggressive behavior to break enemy morale, even when facing superior numbers and technology. This suggested that warfare was not just something humans learned, but something they were naturally evolved to excel at. Lieutenant Yun discovered that human children learned these psychological tactics through play rather than formal instruction. Their games taught them to read opponent behavior, identify weaknesses, and exploit moments of confusion or fear. The entire human species was essentially a military academy that produced natural warriors from birth to death. The reconnaissance team realized that they were observing something unprecedented in galactic history. Most intelligent species evolved to avoid conflict and seek peaceful solutions to problems. Humans appeared to have evolved specifically for warfare, with every aspect of their biology, psychology, and culture optimized for combat effectiveness. Commander Kale reviewed all the data they had gathered and reached a troubling conclusion. Humans were not just another warrior species that happened to be good at fighting. They were apex predators who had spent their entire evolutionary history becoming more efficient killers. The galaxy had never encountered anything like them before. As the team prepared to gather more intelligence about human capabilities, they wondered if their own species would survive the encounter with these natural-born warriors. The evidence suggested that humans were still evolving, still improving their fighting abilities, and still finding new ways to become more deadly. The small blue planet below them looked peaceful from space, but the Vorthans now knew it was home to the most dangerous predators the universe had ever produced, and those predators were just beginning to explore the galaxy, looking for new challenges to test their remarkable abilities against. Corporal Ha spent hours analyzing human historical databases and made a discovery that sent shock waves through the entire reconnaissance team. Every major advancement in human technology had originated from military applications. Their medical knowledge improved because they needed to heal battle wounds more effectively. Their transportation systems developed to move armies across vast distances faster than their enemies. Their communication networks were designed primarily to coordinate attacks and share tactical information. Even the human space program that had allowed them to leave their home planet began as a method for delivering weapons across intercontinental distances. The rockets that now carried human explorers to other worlds were originally designed to carry nuclear warheads to enemy cities. This pattern of military innovation driving civilian progress was unlike anything observed in other civilizations. Most disturbing was the revelation that human history consisted almost entirely of continuous warfare, while other species had experienced a few major conflicts during their development. Humans had been fighting each other without pause for their entire recorded existence. They had never experienced true galactic peace and seemed incapable of maintaining nonviolent relationships for extended periods. Private Day studied human military records and discovered that even during times when no major wars were occurring, humans maintained massive standing armies and constantly prepared for future battles. War was not something that happened to them occasionally. War was their natural state of being, and peace was merely a temporary break between conflicts. The Vorthan team examined human biology more closely, using advanced medical scanners, and found that their bodies were perfectly designed for sustained combat. Their eyes could track multiple fast-moving targets simultaneously, while maintaining peripheral awareness of potential threats. Their hands possessed the strength to grip weapons effectively while retaining fine motor control for precision tasks. Human cardiovascular systems could maintain peak performance much longer than other species, allowing them to fight at full intensity for extended periods without fatigue. Their muscle structure was optimized for explosive movements and rapid recovery between bursts of activity. Their nervous systems process sensory information faster than most alien species, enabling split-second tactical decisions. Even human psychology appeared to be adapted specifically for warfare. They could function effectively while experiencing levels of fear, pain, and stress that would completely paralyze other intelligent species. They maintained clear thinking and tactical awareness in chaotic situations where most aliens would become confused and helpless. Lieutenant Min observed human soldiers preparing for a dangerous mission behind enemy lines and was amazed by their mental attitude. Instead of discussing casualty rates or planning escape routes, they focused entirely on completing their objective successfully. They assumed they would succeed and planned accordingly rather than preparing for failure or retreat. This psychological approach was completely alien to Vorthan military thinking, which emphasized careful risk assessment and preservation of personnel and equipment. Human soldiers seemed willing to sacrifice everything, including their own lives, to achieve mission success. This mindset made them incredibly dangerous opponents because they could not be deterred by threats or intimidated by superior force. Major Ray analyzed human spacecraft design and realized why their vessels looked so primitive compared to advanced alien technology. Humans did not build ships for comfort, efficiency, or elegance. They built them to be weapons platforms capable of inflicting maximum damage while absorbing tremendous punishment in return. Every human spacecraft was essentially a flying fortress designed for combat effectiveness rather than peaceful exploration. Their crude appearance concealed devastating firepower, incredible structural durability, and redundant systems that allowed them to continue fighting even after suffering damage that would disable most alien vessels. The reconnaissance team studied human crew training procedures and discovered that human spaceship operators were cross-trained in multiple systems so that any crew member could perform essential functions if others were killed or injured. This redundancy allowed human vessels to remain operational under conditions that would leave other ships helpless. Captain Nara examined human weapon technology and found that their crude projectile weapons were actually more effective in many situations than the advanced energy systems used by other species. Human bullets could penetrate energy shields that deflected plasma beams, and their explosive devices created shrapnel patterns that were difficult to defend against. What made human weapons even more dangerous was their tendency to modify and improve them constantly. Human soldiers regularly customized their equipment for specific missions, creating unique tactical advantages that enemies could not predict or prepare for. This innovation at the individual level made human forces extremely adaptable and unpredictable. Colonel Lee discovered that humans had developed entire military doctrines based on fighting against technologically superior opponents. They assumed they would face enemies with better equipment and had created tactics specifically designed to neutralize advanced technology using primitive but effective methods. Human military manuals contained detailed instructions for capturing and reverse engineering alien technology, disabling advanced systems, using electromagnetic pulses, and improvising weapons from civilian materials. This suggested that humans had been preparing for galactic warfare long before they encountered other species. the team realized that human military effectiveness came not from any single advantage, but from the combination of biological, psychological, and cultural adaptations that made them perfect warriors. Their bodies were designed for combat, their minds were optimized for tactical thinking, and their society was structured to produce better soldiers. Commander Kale reviewed all the intelligence they had gathered and reached a terrifying conclusion. Humans were not just another species that happened to be good at fighting. They were the ultimate predators that evolution had spent millions of years perfecting for the specific purpose of warfare. Every aspect of human development had been shaped by constant conflict with other humans, creating a species that excelled at every form of combat, from individual dueling to massive fleet engagements. They had spent their entire evolutionary history becoming more effective killers in the process. Was still continuing, the reconnaissance team realized they were observing something that had never existed before in galactic history, a species that was naturally adapted for warfare at every level, from individual psychology to planetary civilization. Humans were not just warriors, they were war incarnate. As they prepared their report for Vorthan High Command, the team wondered if any species in the galaxy could survive contact with humanity. The evidence suggested that humans were still evolving, still improving their capabilities, and still finding new ways to become more deadly opponents. Looking at the peaceful blue planet below them, the Vorthans now understood why 3 entire battle fleets had vanished without sending distress signals. The humans had not just defeated those forces, they had probably studied the wreckage and used it to improve their own military capabilities. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when the ultimate predators decided to leave their home world and explore the universe, looking for new challenges to test their remarkable abilities against. Colonel Lee accessed classified recordings from recent battles between humans and various alien invasion forces and found footage that was almost too disturbing to analyze. The videos showed that humans did not simply fight to defend their territory. They engaged in warfare with a savage creativity that turned every encounter into a psychological nightmare for their enemies. Human tactics violated every civilized rule of engagement that had been established by the Galactic Council over thousands of years. They used psychological manipulation to terrorize opponents before battles even began, broadcasting horrifying sounds and images designed to break enemy morale. They employed weapons specifically engineered to cause maximum pain and suffering, rather than quick, clean deaths. Most shocking was the human practice of booby-trapping their own fallen soldiers, so that enemy forces attempting to examine bodies or recover intelligence would be killed by hidden explosives. This tactic showed a level of calculated cruelty that was unprecedented among intelligent species and demonstrated complete disregard for basic military ethics. Sergeant Wu studied human prisoner treatment protocols and discovered that they showed no mercy to captured enemies and rarely respected surrender attempts. Human interrogation techniques involved physical and psychological torture that would be considered war crimes by any civilized standard. Yet these brutal methods appeared to be extremely effective at extracting information. The reconnaissance team watched humans fight against a technologically superior alien race called the Nexari, who possessed energy shields that deflected conventional weapons and power armor that enhanced their strength. By factor of 10, any rational species would have retreated immediately when faced with such overwhelming advantages. Instead, humans responded by developing new tactics specifically designed to neutralize Nexari technology within days of first contact. They used focused electromagnetic pulses to overload energy shields, then attacked with primitive but deadly melee weapons that could penetrate the gaps in power armor systems. Human soldiers set elaborate ambush in environments where Nexari power armor became a disadvantage rather than an asset. They lured enemy forces into underwater combat, where the heavy suits dragged soldiers to the bottom or into zero-gravity situations where the enhanced strength became useless. Private men watched in horror as human forces captured Nexari soldiers alive and subjected them to interrogation techniques that extracted detailed information about weaknesses in their equipment and military tactics. The humans then shared this intelligence with all their military units, allowing them to exploit Nexari vulnerabilities across multiple battlefronts simultaneously. What made human adaptability even more terrifying was the speed at which they learned and improved their methods within weeks of encountering a new enemy. Humans would develop countermeasures that neutralized alien advantages and turned superior technology against its creators. The team observed human soldiers celebrating after a particularly brutal victory against an alien raiding party and realized that they were not relieved that the fighting was over. They were excited about the prospect of engaging in future battles. Human military culture treated warfare as the highest form of achievement and personal fulfillment. Human war heroes were not celebrated for their mercy or restraint, but for their ability to kill large numbers of enemies using creative and efficient methods. Their greatest legends involved individuals who had single-handedly destroyed entire alien units through superior tactics and ruthless determination. Lieutenant Bio analyzed human military training footage and discovered that soldiers were taught to view combat as an art form that could always be improved and refined. They studied the techniques of legendary warriors and constantly developed new methods for defeating different types of opponents. Human military academies maintained detailed databases of every known alien species, including their physical capabilities, psychological weaknesses, and technological limitations. This information was used to develop species-specific combat doctrines that maximized human advantages while exploiting enemy vulnerabilities. Major Ray examined human logistics systems and found that they were designed to support extended military campaigns with minimal external resources. Human armies could manufacture weapons and equipment using captured materials and could maintain fighting effectiveness even when cut off from their main supply lines. The ability to fight independently without regular resupply made human forces extremely difficult to defeat through conventional siege tactics. Most alien armies became ineffective when their supply chains were disrupted. But humans actually seemed to fight better when forced to improvise and adapt to changing conditions. Captain Nara studied human command structures and discovered that their military leadership was selected based on combat effectiveness rather than political connections or administrative skills. Human officers were promoted primarily for their ability to win battles, regardless of casualties or collateral damage. This meritocratic system ensured that human military leaders were always chosen from among the most successful warriors, creating a command hierarchy that was optimized for warfare rather than peacetime administration. The result was military organizations that were incredibly effective at destroying enemies. Commander So watched recordings of human fleet engagements and was amazed by their willingness to sacrifice valuable ships and equipment to achieve tactical advantages. Human commanders would deliberately ram their vessels into enemy ships or use them as improvised weapons platforms even when it meant certain destruction. Recordings showed human crews continuing to fight even when their ships were critically damaged and evacuation was impossible. They turned disabled vessels into explosive traps or used them as boarding platforms to attack enemy ships at close range. This fanatical dedication to mission completion made them unpredictable and extremely dangerous opponents. The reconnaissance team realized that human warfare was not limited to physical combat. They also engaged in information warfare, propaganda campaigns, and economic attacks designed to weaken enemy societies from within. Human intelligence services could infiltrate and destabilize alien civilizations using techniques that most species were completely unprepared to defend against. Private Yan discovered that humans had developed biological and chemical weapons specifically designed to target different alien species. They maintained extensive research programs focused on finding ways to weaponize diseases and toxins that were harmless to humans but deadly to other forms of life. The level of scientific sophistication required for this type of species-specific biological warfare was staggering. It demonstrated that humans possessed not only the desire to destroy their enemies but also the technical capability to develop weapons that could eliminate entire alien populations while leaving human forces unharmed. Colonel Lee compiled all the intelligence they had gathered about human military capabilities and reached a disturbing conclusion. Humans were not just effective warriors. They were the most dangerous military force the galaxy had ever encountered, combining advanced technology with psychological warfare, biological weapons, and tactical innovations that made them nearly impossible to defeat. The reconnaissance team prepared to transmit their findings to Vorthan High Command, knowing that the information would fundamentally change how their empire viewed humanity. The evidence was clear that humans represented an existential threat to every other species in the galaxy. As they prepared their final report, the team wondered if there was any way to coexist peacefully with a species that seemed to view warfare as their natural state of being. The answer would determine the future relationship between humanity and the rest of the galactic community. The Vorthan reconnaissance team gathered in their ship command center to compile their final report for High Command, and the weight of their discoveries pressed down on them like the gravity of a collapsing star. They had uncovered the truth about why humans were the universe's most deadly warriors, and the reality was more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. Commander Kale reviewed each section of their intelligence gathering and realized that humans were not simply another species that happened to excel at combat. They were beings that had evolved specifically for the purpose of warfare, with every aspect of their biology, psychology, and culture optimized to produce the most effective killing machines the galaxy had ever encountered. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Human bodies were designed for sustained combat with enhanced sensory systems that could track multiple targets simultaneously, cardiovascular efficiency that allowed extended periods of peak performance, and nervous systems that processed tactical information faster than most other intelligent species. Their psychological makeup enabled them to function effectively under conditions of extreme stress, fear, and pain that would completely incapacitate other beings. They could make split-second decisions in chaotic combat situations and maintain fighting effectiveness even when facing certain death. Most remarkably, humans possessed an adaptability that allowed them to learn from every encounter and develop countermeasures for any advantage their enemies might possess. They turned superior alien technology against its creators and found ways to neutralize advanced defensive systems using primitive but ingenious methods. Private Yun made the observation that completed their understanding of human nature. Humans were the only known species that fought wars for reasons other than immediate survival. They would sacrifice everything, including their own lives, to defend abstract concepts like honor, freedom, and revenge that existed only in their minds. This psychological trait made them impossible to defeat through conventional diplomatic or military means. Most species could be reasoned with or intimidated into surrender. When facing overwhelming force, humans would continue fighting for intangible principles even when logic dictated that resistance was hopeless. The reconnaissance team had documented human willingness to engage in prolonged conflicts that devastated their own civilization rather than accept unfavorable peace terms. They preferred mutual destruction to submission and would drag their enemies down with them rather than admit defeat. Captain Nara analyzed human social structures and discovered that their entire civilization was essentially a military academy that produced warriors from birth to death. Their competitive culture created individuals who constantly sought to improve their combat abilities. Their pack mentality enabled devastating tactical coordination. Their educational system taught strategic thinking and resource management through games that simulated warfare. Even human art, literature, and entertainment focused heavily on conflict and competition. Their greatest cultural achievements celebrated military victories and heroic sacrifices in battle. Their stories taught moral lessons through tales of warriors overcoming impossible odds through courage and determination. Lieutenant Min studied human technological development and found that virtually every innovation had military applications or origins. Their advances in metallurgy, chemistry, physics, and engineering were all driven by the need to create better weapons, more effective armor, and superior military equipment. Humans had turned scientific research into a weapon by focusing their intellectual resources on solving tactical problems and developing new methods of warfare. Their academic institutions worked closely with military organizations to ensure that theoretical discoveries could be rapidly converted into practical battlefield advantages. Major Ray examined human industrial capacity and discovered that their manufacturing systems were designed to rapidly convert civilian production to military purposes in times of crisis, human factories could switch from producing consumer goods to weapons and military vehicles within days of receiving orders. This industrial flexibility meant that human military potential was much greater than their standing forces suggested. In a prolonged conflict, they could mobilize their entire civilization for warfare production, creating vast armies. Equipped with increasingly sophisticated weapon systems, the team realized that humans had been preparing for galactic warfare long before they encountered other species. Their military doctrines assumed they would face technologically superior opponents and included detailed strategies for fighting asymmetric campaigns against advanced civilizations. Human war colleges taught their officers how to defeat enemies with better weapons, superior numbers, and advanced technology using tactics that emphasized human advantages in adaptability. Psychological warfare and tactical innovation, this preparation made them extremely dangerous opponents for any species that underestimated their capabilities. Colonel Lee reviewed recordings of human diplomatic negotiations and discovered that even their peaceful interactions contained subtle elements of psychological manipulation and strategic positioning. Humans approached every relationship as a potential conflict and gathered intelligence about possible opponents even during friendly exchanges. The reconnaissance team concluded that there were only two types of intelligent species in the universe: those who were allies with humans and those who would eventually be destroyed by them. The evidence suggested that peaceful coexistence was possible only if other species accepted human dominance and avoided threatening human interests. Commander Kale transmitted their final report to Vorthan High Command with recommendations for immediate diplomatic contact. The message emphasized that military confrontation with humanity would result in the complete destruction of the Vorthan Empire regardless of their technological advantages. The report recommended offering humans favorable trade agreements, advanced technology transfers, and formal recognition of their territorial claims in hopes of establishing peaceful relations before human expansion brought them into direct conflict with Vorthan space. Within hours of receiving the intelligence analysis, the Vorthan Empire began peace negotiations with Earth, offering everything the humans might want. In exchange for non-aggression agreements, the Empire leaders understood that survival required accommodation with the apex predators who had emerged from the small blue planet. As the reconnaissance ship prepared to depart Earth's solar system, the team looked back at the world that had fundamentally changed their understanding of warfare and evolution. They had discovered that humans were not just dangerous because of their technology or tactics, but because they represented the ultimate expression of evolutionary pressure toward combat effectiveness. Private Day made the final observation that would haunt the team for the rest of their lives. Humans were still evolving, still improving their warfare capabilities, and still finding new ways to become more efficient killers. The species that had already conquered 3 Vorthan battle fleets was actively working to become even more deadly. The galaxy's most feared warriors were not satisfied with their current level of effectiveness. They continued researching new weapons, developing better tactics, and enhancing their physical and mental capabilities through advanced technology. The process of becoming better predators never stopped as their ship entered hyperspace for the journey home. The Vorthan team wondered what the universe would look like in a few decades when humanity had spread across the galaxy. The evidence suggested that other species had two choices: adapt to human dominance or face extinction. The small blue planet disappeared behind them, but its inhabitants would soon spread across the stars, carrying their warrior culture and evolutionary advantages to every corner of known space. The age of human expansion was about to begin, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same.